Hi there. Hey, Mr. Bills here again. We're going to start something new. Some of you may have done something like this before, and if you have, that's great. But I think hearing another voice give you some tips on how to do this grid system can help you a lot. So make sure to watch this video before you start doing this assignment. We're going to learn to use a grid system to really accurately enlarge an image. And this is going to be a setup as far as your final portrait drawing. This is how you're going to achieve a good likeness by using this grid system. All right, so here we go. Make sure your first and last name are on it over here, because hopefully they all look just alike. And so we really need your name on here nice and clearly. Here's the key right over here, and it reminds you over and over again, halfway, halfway. And this one kind of got you started. So what we're doing is just taking this area right in here that's dark, and you'll see samples of this in the rest of the Google Slides show. Just this area in dark that has the smaller grid boxes, we're going to reproduce that and enlarge it down here. It's actually 4 times the size because it's twice this way and twice that way. So here we go. This one right up here, this box A1, see there's an A right there and there's a 1 over here that corresponds with this A1 right here. So B2 would be this box and B2 would be this box. So that's what the letters and numbers are for. It'll help you keep track of where you are. Now this half and half thing right here is equal to this half and half thing right there. So that's what this means. Each box that you think you need to, you can divide it into half, just like that, and that helps you become more accurate. So you can see how the edge of this Wildcat, the edge of his head, it leaves behind that little triangle right there, and check it out, there's that triangle right there. It's bigger because it needs to be. You can see how this little teardrop shape bumps across that halfway line. So the same thing happens here. Okay, so that's how you can be really accurate with it. And I'm going to do a couple of them and take my time. Then I'll do it really fast and hyperspeed. But just to show you the technique and the concept behind it. So if I took a line like that, and my pencil line doesn't show very much on here, but you don't need it to because you can see where it is. And the idea here is don't measure. Really do this by eye. So you want to get pretty good at when you draw those 2 lines going across the middle, you want to make sure these 4 squares are all square. So if you accidentally make this line go over to the left or right, it's going to kind of mess up your drawing. So here, and I usually do it kind of lightly, put a line right down the middle and across the center. So whatever you do here, you must do here. If the grids don't match each other, it doesn't work. So now even if I cut this in half, I can still now think halfway, halfway again. So if I just want to think about that top section of B1 and this top section of B1, I can just see that little bump of the eyebrow going. So if I look between here and here, and I think halfway, it's a little above that. It's almost halfway again. So if I think here and here, if I think halfway, there's halfway again. I make a little landmark. Make a little kind of a dash or a dot like that. Don't try to draw the whole thing in one sweep. Now I can look at where it exits this box, and it looks like it goes pretty much right through that cross. So right through that cross. So I know it's going to start there and end over here. But how far over does it go? And again, I'm talking through this whole thing, so it's going to take longer for me to do this. When you start to do it by yourself, this internal monologue is going on. So if I think there's about halfway between these 2 marks, I do the same thing here. Here's about halfway between those 2 marks, right? And I can see that that is up a little higher, then it swoops down. So it's up a little higher, and it doesn't get super close to that. And I try to make sure that just that little shape right there is close to that shape. Now if I want to start to do the one right below, see this one's empty, so it stays empty. This one, if I took that, there's that halfway mark, I can see it just barely, and I went down halfway again, it's about halfway up where that eyebrow exits. So here we go. Here it is right here, same spot, halfway, halfway again, and we can come pretty close. Now you have to kind of use your eye like we've done in the past when we did contour drawing. You need to really look at the, oh, I don't like that. You need to look at where the contour goes. Yeah, I like that one better. This part was over that way farther. Then I can see this is halfway between the top of the grid box and where I drew that line. So halfway, notice how I make a little mark first, and then there's a little bit of a swoop to that line right there. So I can make a little bit of a swoop to my line there. So now I'm pretty darn sure that that's accurate. Now, if that was somebody's eye that you were drawing, you would want that eye to be accurate. If you're drawing a friend or yourself or a celebrity or an athlete or whatever you pick, that's going to be important to do that. Then you go to the next box. So let me see. I can do that eye later. That might just barely cut into that box right there, but I can do that later. Honestly, it doesn't matter where you go in the drawing. I'm right-handed. I typically kind of go across the top from left to right. That's just me. Or you could go down each column from left to right. So as you're working, you can always see what you've done. If you start at this side and then start working in that direction, you're going to cover up what you've done if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, it's good to start over here for the same reason. So as you work your way across, you're not covering things up. Now, I'm going to draw this line going across, and I'm going to draw that line going down. Now, if you feel like you don't need to draw both of those lines, and you can just tell yourself, that's halfway right there, and just over here, I'm going to make a mark halfway. And if I think I can draw that line really accurately, actually, the highest part of this bump is just right about where that line is, or over to the left a little bit. So I know that I need to let this angle be sharper here to get it to really look more like that eyebrow. And then under here, that's just barely, let's see, that's right at halfway. So right at halfway, I know that this is going to come down and meet. And then between halfway and here, halfway again, is where the bottom of that eyebrow is. So there's halfway, between halfway and it's right about halfway again. So I see you kind of talk to yourself in your head. And then where this little corner is, if I went like that, and I went like that to do my little halfway things, I can see that's about halfway down, and it's about halfway over. That's a little above halfway. So if I went and just took that and that, it goes a little above halfway, but it was halfway over. So again, I made myself a target first. Then I can... So that's a pretty good eyebrow. I know that because I really paid attention to that halfway thing. All right, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to put it in hyperspeed. You'll see me go really fast here, and then we'll come back at the end and show you what to do. Okay, now that I've done a little bit, I want to remind you of one thing. Actually, I need to tell you something I forgot to tell you. And that is that it's really important not only to look at where the lines cut through the grid and the smaller grids that you make, it is super important to look for those little negative shapes and negative spaces. So what I mean by that is, as I did this one, I was looking at that little shape right there between my half and half grid lines and where the lines of the Wildcat went through. So there's a matching little shape right there, that kind of rectangular shape right there. There should also be a nice big kind of a triangle right there. See that little triangle with a little cutoff end? See, here's that little triangle with the cutoff end. I should be able to see, there's a little triangle right there. There's a little triangle right there. So those are what I look for when I grade these. If I can see that some of these negative shapes are correctly drawn, and you've done negative shape work before, it's almost automatic that the shape of the Wildcat will be just right. Okay, so really watch out for that as you go along. That's what I'm looking at when I go. So I'll put it back in hyperspeed. All right, now that we're finishing this thing up, and you can see I've got it all shaded in except for this one little part down here. You do want to color in nice and dark all the parts that are dark up on top. However, when you do this, you don't have to use our perfect little shading rules. However, you do want to be careful, and you want to be pretty complete. You can see I'm kind of cheating here as far as shading goes, but that's not the point for this particular drawing. Okay, so once that's all done, you're pretty much finished. However, I do want to remind you and hopefully let you know that, or I wanted you to notice how often I was going up here to see where halfway was. And then I would make a mark and then draw the line to it. It's a lot like making a little dot-to-dot drawing. Make a few little landmarks, maybe a couple little more, and then you kind of use your eye to connect the landmarks. That helps a lot. Don't just start drawing. I've had some students, they will use the grid real carefully in the first few boxes, and then they just start drawing by eye and by feel, and things get off that way. You want to make this an exact replication and a really accurate enlargement of this part of the drawing down here, because that's what you're going to do when you do your portrait drawing. So really make sure to keep using those little half and half grid marks. You can see I left mine alone. They're kind of soft. They should be softer than your drawing. Make your drawing nice and dark so you can easily see it, please. And I really want you to leave those half and half marks. That helps show that you were doing it right. And again, I want to remind you, watch out for little negative spaces. So like that little curve right there, I think that's a little off. I could fix that because the negative space looks different. It's like I think maybe this part could be a little lower, and that bend right there could be a little bit less bendy. You want to look for it like on the teeth. Let me get that a little bit darker right there so you can see it. You can see a skinny little triangle, and then there's that, kind of that rectangular odd shape right there. So those are the things I look for when I'm grading. So those are the things you should look for when you're evaluating it before you're finished. So this is a really important drawing to get used to using that grid correctly. Again, don't just go by feel. Use the grid, use those little landmarks. The only time you kind of go by feel is in between those landmarks. There you have to get those little curves and bumps. That's using your eye. But it's nearly mathematical. You can be so accurate with this. It's really a handy tool to use when you're drawing. All right, there you go. And all the details will be in the description in the assignment. And I hope it goes well for you. See you next time.